I remember one time I was searching on YouTube and the algorithm kept on suggesting one video to me. The thumbnail showed this 30-year-old guy wearing a white dress shirt, slim tie, and some slim rim glasses to go with them, and an odd bandana wrapped around his forehead. It seemed that this man was sitting in an interview setting in a dark room, although he was well lit in a 90s kind of way. All clues pointed to an old interview, and so I wasn't interested. But like a lot of us, I couldn't understand why this video kept on popping up in my recommendations. And so, like a lot of us, I clicked on the video. That well-dressed man was writer David Foster Wallace, and he was being interviewed by Charlie Rose. And by the way, Charlie Rose had this great run in the 90s interviewing some really interesting people. And this is my first exposure to the mind of David Foster Wallace. I didn't know who he was, what he does, or what he was talking about. Like a suspect being interrogated, he couldn't get a word out of his book without stuttering his teeth, twitching his eyes, or opening his sweat glands for that bandana to soak up all that sweat. But despite all that, he spoke intellectually without the pretension, sincerely without the cringe, and he had this sharp observation whilst looking like he had no care in the world at the same time. He was so self-aware that it pained me to hear him speak about how nervous he was all the time during the interview. But I realized that I actually quite liked listening to him talking about film, fiction, and pop culture. Charlie Rose actually mentioned in the interview that whilst he was interviewing David Lynch, he plucked the word Lynchian straight from David Foster Wallace's book in the actual interview. So does that mean David Foster Wallace coined the term Lynchian? I don't know. And I also thought to myself, since I like listening to him so much, I might as well read his books. And also I wanted an excuse to start reading more. The most famous of his works is The Literary Mammoth, the critically acclaimed Infinite Jest. But that's 1,000 pages. So I picked up this. A supposedly fun thing I'll never do again. A book of essays, which is great because I love reading nonfiction. I actually prefer it over fiction. And I've got to say, this is amazing. I actually loved it. From playing tennis back in the early days when he was a semi-pro to David Lynch to a hilarious introspective account of a luxury cruise ship. But for my money, the essay that really stuck out in my mind, and the one I want to talk about, is the second essay, E Unibis Pluram, Television and US Fiction. E Unibis Pluram is Latin for from one, many, which is a play on out of many, one, which was the motto for the United States before they changed it to In God We Trust. Just from the title, Wallace shows us just what TV has done to the US pop culture. The effect is that television and modern fiction has transformed millions of individuals into one giant commodity ready for corporations to exploit. Belonging to the slacker generation, Gen X, he was amongst the first to grow up with the silver screen in the household. Wallace had built a library of TV content in his mind, collecting cliches and tropes that plagued TV programming. Not only did it inform Wallace about US pop culture, but like millions of voyeurs laying their eyes on the silver screen every day, he couldn't get enough of it. In the essay, he talks about growing up with TV and not getting enough of it, and talking about how it's changed over time, going from laughing at gags that were for chucks and giggles to laughing cynically at TV itself, just because of how bad it was. So he was laughing ironically. A society obsessed with watching TV day in and day out, especially in the 90s, has some implications of addiction. Wallace himself was actually a self-diagnosed addict, which helped him in pointing out the phenomena of meta watching content that references other content, which effectively makes the content exclusive to those who've watched the original content, if that makes sense. So a simple example would be inside jokes. You can't understand the joke unless you understand the context. A cliche that's turned into warm nostalgia. Something that's changed TV and film forever, for better or worse. Mostly worse. About this matter, David Foster Wallace says, "The best TV of the last 5 years has been about ironic self-reference like no previous species of postmodern art could ever have dreamed of." Then he goes on to talk about how irony treats criticism. Listen to this. "What explains the pointlessness of most published TV criticism is that television has become immune to charges that it lacks any meaningful connection to the world outside it. It's not that charges of non-connection have become untrue, but that they've become deeply irrelevant. Television used to point beyond itself. Those of us born in, say, the 60s were trained by television to look where it pointed, usually at versions of real life, made prettier, sweeter, livelier by succumbing to a product or temptation. Today's mega audience is way better trained, and TV has discarded what's not needed. A dog, if you point at something, will look only at your finger. Wallace actually goes to town on irony, which is justified by the fact that TV ironically presents products as a way of expressing your individuality, but affords to be advertised on television only because it sells to a mass audience, which is just brilliant. By purchasing that product, you have now become a part of the herd, so to speak. In the interest of profit, it's better for the audience members to be lone viewers who want to be a part of a group consisting of unique individuals. Quite true, he says. Television regards irony sort of the way educated, lonely people regard television. Television both fears irony's capacity to expose and needs it. Irony, he says, is used as sort of a shield in US pop culture to defend itself against ridicule. Although irony can be fun entertainment and effective at that, he also argues at the same time they are agents of despair and stasis in US culture. Stasis means inactivity or just plateauing. Advertising agencies and giant corporations are the usual users and abusers of postmodern irony and self-awareness, serving as both contributors and facilitators to TV. They've managed to bring out ironic humor from the Cool Club in the 60s to the tired cliches that kids love to hate in the 80s. Boomer yuppies didn't mind it when commercials used processed tunes from the 60s and 70s to instill the feeling of nostalgia. And therefore, yuppies can purchase those same products in order to regain that lost era. And it's not just Gen Xers and boomers and TV. YouTubers and YouTube content creators take this up to a whole different level. The vlogger personality content reigns supreme on this platform, even more so than a director that stars and produces and writes and acts in his own piece. The vlogger doesn't just star in his own piece, but he presents himself to play himself every single week. They tend to focus on gear, equipment, technology, and products. Remember what Wallace said about TV using irony and self-awareness to sell products to audiences. This is why behind the scenes, office tours, what's in my bag videos do the best. But that's just my opinion, you don't have to believe me. And from my point of view, Wallace is actually spot on. Irony, self-awareness, self-mockery, irreverence, all the things that come with post-modernity have taken over pop culture, including film. Just take a look at Marvel. It's the best case scenario of cliche becoming into warm nostalgia. A nostalgia that is weaponized by filmmakers and executives alike to lure people into remembering that one time that character did something that resembled something that they had seen in a previous Marvel movie they had seen years ago. Although I could feel it, I didn't know how to express it. And I also didn't know why it bugged me so much. And that's why reading, I find, is so important. Reading someone like Wallace who can damn well articulate his abstract thoughts and abstruse social behavior allows me to put words to my own feelings, thoughts, and views that I couldn't even begin to notice in the first place, let alone articulate. In a way, reading books allows me to find out more about myself. All these things encourage people to watch their screens cynically, which becomes a problem because ridicule and mockery, as both a form of social intercourse and art form, scares me. It frightens me to open up, even if it's on YouTube. It trains audiences to laugh at characters who put each other down and ridicule each other for expressing values, emotions, and vulnerability, whether it be good or bad. In a cynical screen-watching world, mockery and criticism is a free-for-all. And maybe that's not bad, but we definitely feel that something's wrong. It's almost like the world forgot how to communicate openly and honestly, with serious humility. I love this quote in the book. He quotes someone as saying, "Irony is the voice of the trapped, who've come to enjoy its caged." For those who feel suffocated, irony cannot do anything to improve your condition. At best, it distracts from the real issues. Wallace's thesis is that irony seeks to criticize, destroy people and culture, and therefore cannot rebuild anything to replace the hypocrisies it debunks. He goes so far as to saying irony tyrannizes us. As I was reading this book, more specifically this essay, I couldn't help but think about what all of Wallace talked about has become much more apparent since the birth of the internet and subsequently social media. TV is nothing but a older, friendlier version of postmodern irony. Recently, I was watching a film by Bo Burnham. It's called Inside. And what a film. From beginning to end, I've seen a man put on one of the most interesting performances I have seen in a long time. It's debatable whether he was putting on a performance or being himself. I don't even know what to call it. He calls it a special. Essentially, it's an hour or two of a series of jingles that mocks the hypocrisies and absurdities that are found in US pop culture. From Jeffrey Bezos to the internet, to white women on Instagram, to FaceTiming his mum, to reaction videos, to healing the world with comedy. The entire piece serves as a metaphor for something. I don't know, and I don't pretend to know. But he uses it to show the inconsistencies and hypocrisies that are found in US culture. Bo really shines as an artist through this special. He has shown that he can be creative, funny, all while being stuck in a dwarvish-sized room, delivering spectacularly colorful cinematography and a diverse range of studio-polished tunes with nothing but camera, lights, projector, and a piano. It's actually really inspiring to watch. But where I make the connection from Bo to Wallace is the fact that Inside is a very self-aware film, extremely self-aware. In fact, he's self-aware about his self-awareness, although he does declare that his self-awareness doesn't absolve him from self-contradiction. And Wallace was right. 20, 30 years ago, he was right. Bo clearly criticizes the hypocrisies and inconsistencies that sit at the social and political fabric of US pop culture. But through irony, self-awareness, and irreverence, Bo has unfortunately restricted his special as it doesn't offer anything new. It can't. By virtue of its nature, it can't. We all know that privileged celebrities are out of touch with the normal people. We know that brands are hypocritical liars, getting behind every trend that we find on social media in order to appeal to customer incentives. We all know this, but what do we do to add to this criticism? And what do we have to add other than questions and mockery? All it breeds is cynicism. That's all that's left. Cynicism. It's strange to say because after watching Inside, I actually feel that Bo has a lot to offer and he's very sincere. And it's also clear that he's struggling. Bo, it's clear that you're struggling with something. There's no doubt. I don't pretend to know because I don't know you personally. Constantly mentioning the fact that you want to kill yourself every now and then on the special. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds familiar. It's an awful feeling. It's an awful feeling when objectively, you know everything in your life is telling you you are okay. You are far better than okay. Objectively, you are doing better than 90% of the world. Everything is pointing towards the fact that you are having an amazing life, but you don't feel it. You don't see it, and you can't help it, and you just can't shake it. And it's easy for people to tell you you're not alone. And it's true, you're not alone, but they just don't understand. You know? As a fellow human, a brother in humanity, if you would like, if I'm allowed to give you any sincere words of support, I would tell you that cynicism doesn't work. It won't help you. It hasn't offered anyone anything but delusion, disdain, self-pity, and I'm afraid to say, narcissistic depression. And I believe you can offer much more. You know? I found out later that Wallace took his own life. He hanged himself. And I can't judge him because I don't know him or what he was going through. But it's clear that Wallace was struggling. And maybe Bo Burnham is struggling. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But that's okay, because after reading this, I realized that we all need to offer something to our collective societies, more than just entertainment, spectacle, and cynical laughter. So I'm offering this, whatever this is. And that's it. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Bye.